So the paradox of leadership for me is that leadership, when you hear about it, is like this thing that's outward. You get a title, a role, a scope, someone deems you a leader. But of course, the paradox is that it's all inside. You either feel like a leader or you don't. You either lead your life or you don't. So it's very much an inner journey. So my whole work is based on helping people and companies take an inner journey. Thanks to all of you for being here. And it's really special to have just the leadership, the women's leadership across the organization. I think it's a really special treat to also get to know each other, and my joy to get to know all of you tonight. What we've carved out for you tonight is a little bit of, for you, kind of self-reflection on that topic of what does authenticity mean? How do you start getting more time and energy to even be able to be authentic? Because sometimes it takes more time and energy to do that. Ironically, and then the we, kind of what is the we collective here that we can keep building. Those who know me are going to know that this is how we're going to play. If you think about kind of the iceberg of your life, of yourself, of your willingness to share and disclose, you probably spend 99% of life up here. How are you behaving, acting? What is the world seeing in you? And you probably spend, most of your mental energy time in here. What am I thinking? How am I feeling? My values, my fears, my worries. I don't think we can talk about leadership and leadership tactics without going from the bottom up. Some people are like, oh, we don't have time for that. I think it's actually non-negotiable to get us where we need to go. So tonight we'll kind of spend some time down here so that when you get here, there is that place of clarity. There is that place of authenticity and really feeling grounded in who you are and what you stand for. The good news, bad news is we're judgment-making machines, right? The human brain is actually a judgment-making vehicle. So there's nothing wrong and bad and shameful about judging. It's what do you do with the judgment that is the leadership tool here. So I'll teach you a whole bunch of stuff on how to quiet the judgment. And so let's really try to not have it, but if you do have it, how do we channel it into curiosity? How do we channel it into a question? How do we channel it into really wondering what might be going on for that woman, right? Or for that situation? That's kind of the antidote to judgment, is going to be curiosity. I always ask clients in a tough love sort of way, right? Are you owning the story or is the damn story owning you? And it's dangerous when the story owns you, which is when we can't do this thing. Good. What else? Wherever you have practices of self-care, start weaving in moments of this type of reflection. It doesn't need to be as grandiose as a year in review, but even like week by week, like where am I at? Day by day, was there self-care? Was there energy? And we'll talk about this right now, like what was their energy? What, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, like what did the shape of it look like? And be ruthless in how you rate yourself along those lines, because if you want to amp up one chapter, one aspect of your leadership, it's got to start with the acknowledgement and like the moment of pause, like we're doing tonight, to then speed up, right? We try and just do speed for speed's sake. It's actually about the art of slowing down to then be able to speed up if you're coming in it from a leadership point of view. Most clients that I work with one-on-one are like, help me conquer my mental chatter. I want it to stop. The problem is that's solving for the wrong thing. Because telling your mental chatter to stop is like asking your heart to stop beating. Biologically, there is a purpose for it. It was created for us to run away from danger, right? We've all heard this. But unfortunately, today we're still like, okay, make it stop, make it stop. I'm just going to figure out a positive affirmation to neutralize it. Yes, and that doesn't work, right? It doesn't work because it's just doing its biology. And the minute you can detach from the power and notice, it's like my heart beating. It's like I have an itch, my body creates an itch and I scratch it. It's just doing what it's meant to do. Your over-engagement with it and over-identification with it is where the problem starts happening. Number one, and again, do not stress out that you need to do 10 things to quiet your mental chatter. Like pick one that you like. Do not have imposter syndrome about imposter syndrome, please. So, number one, you're gonna name it. Okay, so what you just did to me out loud in this room, you actually objectify it rather than feel like it's me. All right, it just became an object, and now we could say, oh, I've got this thing that makes me question myself. Oh, me too. Right? There's something about then we realize it's a human condition rather than there's something wrong with me. Number two, actually acknowledge that it serves a purpose. Tell me how your mental chatter has been helpful. This is one of my absolute favorite coaching tools. I do this with all the folks I work with one-on-one. And basically what you're doing is That was very graceful. Basically what you're doing, I think of the letter J. So you've got your mental chatter, right? And, oh, I'm not good enough. I don't know if I'm smart enough. All right, so you start up here, and then and then what yourself? You actually ask that question, and then what happens? Well, I've got a presentation coming up tomorrow, and what if it really doesn't work out? All right, well, and then what happens? Let's say it goes horribly. Oh, then I'm going to get a lousy performance review. Well, that would suck. That's really too bad. And then what happens after a lousy performance review? Well, yeah, I'll get fired, and then I'm gonna get fired, and it's gonna be terrible. Okay, well, that would suck. That would really suck. And then what happens? Well, and then I'll be homeless, right? No money. I've got homeless. I'm like living on the... So usually your mental chatter, because it's a 3-year-old having a temper tantrum in your brain, it will run out of oxygen. I promise you that. So at some point you're homeless, like it's bad. And I keep going. At that point, I just look at them. I'm like, that would really be the worst of the worst. So then what could happen? And there's always this moment of lift. There's always this moment where then the person looks at me and says, all right, listen, I mean, I have a degree. I would probably just, I'll go get a job at Starbucks. Usually I hear Uber now. I hear a lot of like Uber and Lyft drivers. So it's like, I'd go and, I'd go work with Uber. And I'm like, all right, well, and then what? Listen, I'm good at everything I do, so I'd probably like be the best like in the region or the thing. Like it'll be fine. And then like I'll find some other people to drive for me, and like and then I would like make a thing out of it. The thing always lifts. Think about your mental chatter. If you can contain it and actually give it space to do the dance that we just did, it evaporates. There's not much more once you're homeless in your brain. So your mental chatter usually is in the nightmare flavor, right? We catastrophize, like you were saying. So from 0 to 2 seconds, we're in the homelessness place. Your brain's just making shit up here. Okay? The invitation, if you really want to crack mental chatter, this is one of the most powerful tools to try. You try daydreaming instead. It's not even instead, in addition to. So, same scenario, right? The presentation doesn't go well. Well, you know what? I haven't been happy at this company for a while. What if I take the plunge and go to the next place? And then what happens? Well, I'd be really good at that. And then what if, oh my gosh, what if I got promoted and I actually came in and they gave me more money? And then what happens? Well, then I could write a book. And then I could become this. And then I could become... And then what happens? I mean, you just actually start doing like inverse J. Now, the beauty of this is you're making stuff up whether you're doing it here or here, right? It's all made up. But what you're doing is actually giving your brain permission to experiment. You're giving your brain permission to realize that it can access both the good and the bad, which normally mental chatter, you don't give it that space to expand in both. So mental chatter, I promise you, does not come up when you are at home eating popcorn watching Netflix. Okay, that is not when you're feeling like the imposter. It's gonna happen and prompt when you are about to do something juicy and delicious and big and new and expansive. So think about that if you can actually start relating to your mental chatter as the trigger of like, it's waving the flag of like, hey, I'm coming, we're about to do something pretty incredible. It's a beautiful way to start re-relating to your mind. It will not come to play, I promise you, when you're just kind of on cruise control. It will only come back to the DNA strands, right? When there is part of the roller coaster that's the scary, exciting, we're about to do something. Instead, take the functional strength, take organization, take management, take Excel, and start talking about how you do that thing uniquely. Where do you find energy and passion in that thing? How is that thing your superhero power, or how do you do it in a way that is completely different? When you can start speaking about your strengths that way, mental chatter doesn't exist because you're no longer playing the comparison game. Stop looking over your shoulders, right? When you realize it's your race, you get to decide when we win, when we stop, what we play, when we stop to hydrate. Like, you just start playing your own race. This is the difference between solving for I'm better versus solving for I'm different. Leaders solve for I'm different. What is unique? Leaders do never solve for I'm better, because better is just going to be an exhausting end game of hamster wheel. So just start thinking about, where am I distinctive? Where do I play? What do I care about? What are my values? What's non-negotiable for me? When you add all of that, what's my strengths? My how? What's my why? When you put all of that together, you don't have to play the game of better anymore. You're not rushing. You're not playing anyone else's measuring stick. It's just your game. In which case, how do you want to live this one wonderful life? I always think about compliments and this whole world and the discomfort as this cycle of giving and receiving. And as givers, most of us, I'm making a generalization, right? But we know how to give compliments, right? Give, help, support, right? You wouldn't be in this room if you weren't of that ilk. The problem is when you don't know how to receive, you're actually cutting the cord in our relationship. Because what you're doing is preventing me from being able to give. If giving feels so good, and then you're robbing someone else of giving, we think it's selfless. It's actually extremely selfish. Because I don't have the joy, I don't have the ability to contribute to you, you cut me off. You're doing it with good intention, but just let that marinate for a little bit. What would it look like to give somebody else the joy of giving to you? How do we then lift as a community? This is actually leadership, most important leadership quadrant, because what you do with that recharge zone changes the entire state of affairs. The problem is you can't get from burnout directly to here or directly to flow. You actually need to work your way back through the system. Recharge, if you can be here, then all of a sudden, that stress factor happened and you access recharge immediately, you just beat the whole cycle of this. You are able to access flow, recharge, flow, recharge. There's a little bit of stress, flow, recharge, flow, recharge. This is the difference when people ask me, what does resilience look like? Resilience is the people who have mastered what do they do when they are gifted 5 minutes? What do they do when a meeting ends early? Are you just rushing to your phone? Yes, we all are. Or did you just take a deep breath? Or did you just go grab a glass of water? Or did you call someone that's meaningful to you? Or did you just look at a picture of your dog and smile for a second? What did you do with those 5 minutes? And add those 5 minutes up, it's a whole lot of your life that just went like this because the meeting ended early. Yeah? Sometimes we're gifted 30 minutes. Sometimes we're gifted 2 hours. What do you do with that rather than I've got to catch up? I don't want to be reactive anymore. I don't want to feel exhausted or tired, so now I'm going to go exercise. It almost becomes conditional of what we don't want. And intention is just the flip side. So it could be something as, you know what, I am healthy and vibrant. Today I choose based on my heart, not my head. Today I choose connection and confidence over fear and worry. Like you just, it's like what is top of mind for you, and you just state it in the it's already happening. I like to think of an intention as act as if. Like who would you need to act that day as if this new reality were possible for you? Pick the word of the day, right? And if the word of the day is kindness or peace or sleep or vibrant or excited or connected, when you veer off and get into one of these zones, right? Some stressor happened and you remember, wait, I wanted today to be about peace. You can ask yourself one question, which is what's the one thing I can do right now to reactivate peace? Response is, well, what's the one important thing today? What's the one most important thing? And some days it's just slowing down, right? Some days it's like you all did tonight, slow down on a night where you could have filled it with other things, but to be together to then move forward. That's the difference, is every day it's not about the big excitement of take a trip always, but it's about when you come back from the trip, how do I access a moment of excitement? It completely shifts the brain's antennas. It's the nightmare daydream thing. Rather than the nightmare of what am I not doing towards number one, you do the daydream of what's possible in this moment to tackle your number two. And I promise you, you all can do one thing for your number two. There's no one in here that's going to tell me I can't do a single thing for my number two. That's what you do every day. You're like, where's one area I can find excitement? And it is the vulnerability of raising the hand of I need help, or this is too much, or here's what's happening. Can we just exchange ideas on that? I always think about it as more for the sake of more. Sometimes it's just not a good enough reason, right? Like volume does not equal impact, right? Motion, do not mistake motion for progress is kind of a mantra that I always have in my brain, because motion is addictive sometimes, right? Sometimes it's just enough. And we're great, like let's be fully present in what we decided to do versus overdo. Well, the paradox of leadership for me is that leadership, when you hear about it, is like this thing that's outward. You get a title, a role, a scope, someone deems you a leader. But of course, the paradox is that it's all inside. You either feel like a leader or you don't. You either lead your life or you don't. So it's very much an inner journey. So my whole work is based on helping people and companies take an inner journey. Yeah. So thank you for a wonderful evening.